Okay, I'd like to start this video with an assumption. Let's assume that you're interested in playing your music from physical media. Yeah, I know it's a crazy idea, but let's just run with it. So, the three formats that you're interested in playing are the CD, the compact cassette, and the mini disc. We'll just forget about vinyl for this equation, but we can bring it back in later on in the story. So, those three formats are what we're interested in playing. Now, if you were starting from scratch, you've got nothing at all at the moment, and yet you want to be able to play these formats for whatever reason. I know, a bit of a weird assumption, but let's just start from there. Somebody's got in touch with me and says, I want to play these, what should I get? Well, here's the answer. I wouldn't recommend somebody goes and get themselves a big old hi-fi setup with all separate components. Most people don't have the room for one of those in their house. They don't really want to give over that amount of room to them, and quite often they're really quite expensive as well, especially if you're dealing with proper separate components. But I mean, that's what I've done. I've got a big old hi-fi thing in the lounge. I love it, and I've picked all the components very carefully. But for your average person, a bit too much hassle, to be honest, for most people. So let's just assume that the big old hi-fi thing's out of the equation. So what's left? Well, you might be thinking boomboxes, but I put these here as a bit of a red herring because you won't be able to get a boombox on the market nowadays new that can play Minidisc, and a lot of them could never play it in the first place. I mean, this thing here, this more recent one, this is just a cassette and radio, so we can put that to one side. Now this one can play CD and radio and cassette. The cassette's not brilliant, but it's all right. But no mini disc in here. In fact, to try and get a mini disc in a boombox is quite tricky. There weren't that many released in the UK that had a cassette and a mini disc. Sometimes you might just get the mini disc because they've kind of swapped one component out for the other, but to get all three is quite rare, especially in the UK. You're more likely to find them in Japan, but even there they kind of dump the cassette usually when they put a mini disc in stuff. There are some out there, I'm not saying there aren't, there are some with all three things. Pretty hard to get hold of and quite expensive as well. Now let's just say we're on a budget as well. So we're on this thing where we don't really have much room and we've got a small budget. What are we going to get? Well, here is my answer. This is what I got for £76 from eBay that does those three things and more besides. That was a nice reveal, wasn't it? I don't know, it might be a bit tacky. But anyway, here it is. It's a mini system. Yeah, I didn't even say it right, did I? Mini system, not MIDI, mini system. Yeah, I'll talk more about it in a moment. But yeah, I think this is perhaps where the best bargains lie in used hi-fi at the moment. And I'll explain why. Okay, so here's what I've got. It's a Sony CMT CP505MD. The MD part of that indicates it's got a mini disc recorder, which is here, but in addition to that there's a CD player, an AM FM tuner, and in the top we've got a cassette deck. Now I just want to look a little bit closer at those because there's a couple of nice features in here. The CD player is CD text compatible, so that means if the information is present on the CD, the track titles would display on the LCD screen at the top, and if you were to record a CD onto a mini disc, the track titles would be carried across. And as far as the mini disc component goes, you'll see here it's MD-LP compatible and also uses A-Track Type S. Of course, A-Track is the encoding and decoding technology that was used for mini discs. Type S was the last revision of these. So this is as up-to-date as Minidisc recorders get. Now Type S is actually a technology that was used to improve the decoding for LP2 and LP4, the long play recordings. Now whilst it doesn't have a DAB radio tuner, the radio is compatible with RDS, the radio data system, and that means that most stations on FM should display their name, and some will display other information as well. Now, by the time this came out in 2002, the cassette tape was well past its heyday. Sony have included a cassette recorder on here, but I think it's more of an afterthought than the other components. It's really a convenience feature for playing back your existing tapes. You can make recordings on it though if you want, but I think they were really intending you to make your recordings onto the mini disc section, whether that was from a CD, the radio, an external source, or even copying your tapes across to mini disc. It's a pretty bare bones tape mechanism, but it does have auto reverse. Now, by no means am I saying that this is a high quality device. I'm just saying that it's pretty good value for money for what you get. Now, this one is a little bit more upmarket than some though, because they quite often have plastic speakers whereas this has proper wood ones. You notice that there's a bit of a stain. I don't know if you can see that on this front cover here. A bit mucky overall. So I think if I was using this, I'd take those off. Those look quite nice underneath. I say they look nice though. There's a lot of dust in here, and that is one of the big issues with this. I'm going to have to do quite a bit of cleaning. I don't really want to play any tapes in it until I've cleaned that mechanism. I'll show you why in a moment, but let me just show you the dust on here. Yeah, I think this has been in a house with pets. There's quite a lot of hairs here. I mean, nothing you can't clean off, and at least nobody's broken the speakers, so I should just be able to wipe all that stuff off. If we look at the side of the machine itself, you'll see that these separate sections here, of course, they're fooling no one. It was just a nod to the past where you had separate components on some mini systems. This is just one big unit here. Metal sides on it, but they've still got the lines down there, notice, sort of separating out the different sections, which is all just a nonsense really. Let's just look around the back here. Okay, starting at the top, antenna inputs, spring clip terminals and a coax. Below there, RCA stereo line level input. So you could plug some external device into here to listen to it over your hi-fi. Now, what kind of thing might you want to plug into there? Well, I don't know, it's got most of the things in here that you need, but perhaps a record player. Now, if you were going to plug a record player into here, make sure it outputs at line level. You'd need either an external phono preamp on that record player or a built-in phono stage to bring it up to line level. Now, below there, the speaker connectors. A little bit unusual, these. I'm not sure if this is a proprietary Sony design, but I haven't seen those around very often. So if you wanted to use your own speakers with these, you'd have to find some of those to plug into the back. At the top here, we've got an optical digital input, which would generally be used for recording something onto the mini disc and keeping it in the digital domain all the way through the chain. And then below there, we've got a PC link socket. Now, I'm not really going to go into that in this video. It's something I plan to cover in the future. Now, at the bottom, we've got this fan here. I'm a little bit concerned that this thing might be full of hair, given what the speakers look like, but also what the cassette deck looks like. So let's just take a look at that. Yeah, it's so bad in here. I don't even want to play a cassette in it until I've cleaned it. Just look at the amount of dust. I don't know how that's possible with a closed lid, but it is. And it's the hairs that really concern me. There's so many hairs back here. Yeah, there you go. There's more hair in here than there is on the top of my head. But I don't really want to just try and clean it all out like this. I think I could do with taking the thing apart, just in case there's a lot more inside. Now let's see what else is working. I'm going to eject the CD player here. Now, one thing I've noticed with this, without a CD, when you first boot up, it makes a little bit of a nasty sound. So I'm hoping that's not a problem. I don't know if you could hear that there, but maybe that's something I can sort out if we open it up as well. It might just need a bit of grease on it. Gotta say, I'm really quite happy with the sound quality there, and I notice we've got a button here labelled DSG. Now, I remember DSG as being the Dixon Store Group, but I think it probably is a bass enhancer, so we'll switch that on, we'll give it another go. Based on my time spent with this so far, I'm more than happy with the sound quality. I think it's a rich, well-rounded sound. When you put that DSG mode on, you get more bass. You can feel it in the air, but it still doesn't really overpower the trebles.
This is Greatest Hits Radio. Across Liverpool and the North West. Sounds like this. Greatest Hits Radio.
Well, let's put a mini disc in here. Now, mini discs are a little bit temperamental sometimes in older devices, and people will say things are working even when the mini disc isn't because they just don't have one to test it. So let's give it a go. Oh, we've got the title coming up here. Let's have a listen. Oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah, again, no problem with the mini disc player there. I don't want to put a tape in this though until I've cleaned it, so I think what we need to do at this point is stop, turn off the power and open the case up and have a look inside. Right, now here's the cassette deck section from the top. These side parts, I thought they'd just pull off there or slide off or something, but they seem to be hooked underneath, so I might as well just leave them on because it's this thing that I'm interested in. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have gone as far as taking this apart if I just needed to clean the cassette deck. I would have just blown some air into there or cleaned it with Q-tips. But I really want to be able to get to the CD mechanism to see what that clicking is. So hopefully I'll be able to get to that in a bit, but at the moment we'll just deal with this, and I think what I need to do is just to lift this out of the chassis, which will give me a better look at it. Oh, and there you go, not attached to anything now. Right, I better give that a good clean. Let's just have a closer look at it. Now back in the day, I'm quite sure Sony considered this to be a pretty budget cassette deck. Not the kind of thing they put in their high-end cassette recorders. They're separate. It's just something for a mini system like this, but still it's a lot better than anything you could get nowadays. We've got a Mabuchi motor in here, a genuine one, not a knockoff as well. Got lots of stickers on to prove where it came from. The modern motors, they don't tend to have any kind of stickers on them, which is a bit of a sign that something is afoot. Now round on this side you can see it's quite a complicated setup, but nicely made. A lot of metal in here, where nowadays a lot of this would be plastic. Auto reverse head down here at the bottom, so that just spins around, and pinch roller of course either side, because the tape moves in either direction. And down here a proper erase head, not a permanent magnet but one that's got power going up to it, an electromagnet. But God, that is a mess. Oh, it's a bit bright for this. Let me just turn the brightness down on the camera here. I don't know, can you see how awful that is? It's pretty disgusting down there. I thought I might as well clean the tape head while I'm here, but there's absolutely nothing on it at all. It looks like this mechanism has seen very little use. Perhaps it's just played a handful of cassettes over the years. Now along the top of this mechanism we've got the sensors either side here that check the write protect notch status, and then this one in the middle that checks whether or not a cassette is actually present at all. Now if it could record onto metal tape, there'd be another sensor here to detect the notches on that. So the fact it doesn't have one of those means you're not really supposed to record onto metal tapes with this. It also doesn't have a sensor for type 2 tapes either. So, you know, kind of basic, but one thing I will mention, the fact it has a write protect notch sensor on either side means that it's able to record in either direction, whichever way the tape's going. And that's because at the bottom here we've got the head, but also next to that, that tiny thing there, that is the erase magnet, and that flips around on this part here with the head at the same time. So that means the erase head is before the play head or record head, irrespective of the direction that it's travelling. Right, so let's just slot this back in here again. Yeah, and it fits in there really easily, just 4 screws to go in, and we're sorted other than the ribbon cable I'll have to attach at the end when I put this lid back on. Right, so I'll put that to one side, and hopefully it's going to be as easy to get to this CD mechanism. But looking at it, it doesn't seem that obvious at the moment what I'm supposed to do. I think I probably need to take the front off. I suppose I could live with a clicky CD drive, but since I'm in here, I might as well see if I can get to it. So there's a screw either side of this front section, which I think if I remove those, hopefully this should come off, and then maybe that will give me the access I need to the CD, which is down at the bottom. The mini disc would be pretty easy to get to. It's just this unit here at the top, and I could just take the screws out and lift that out. But beyond there, there's like a circuit board and this plastic cradle type thing, so it gets a little bit complicated, but just try not to break it, I think. There's a couple more screws on the bottom here, so I'll take these out as well. Of course, all the screws I've taken out so far are different sizes to one another, which is great. Now the front of this is also held on from the inside with two screws. There's one that I've managed to take out there, which wasn't too difficult, but the other one is down there at the front, and it's very difficult to get my hand down there. I'm going to have to find a kind of right angle screwdriver or something, because I need to be able to take that screw out, but I just need something that kind of fits down here, because I can't get to that side of it either. So let me have a look through my toolbox. I finally think it's going to be a case of snake driver to the rescue. I bought this thing years ago, and it was supposed to be able to unscrew things that you can't only get to, and I've never found it to be of any use, but I think today is the first time it's actually going to do something. Yeah, there we go. There comes the screw. The problem with it is normally it doesn't bend enough, but it bends just enough for this. So that's the screw out of the front there now. Let's see if we can take the front off. Yeah, I really didn't want to unplug this, but here we go. I have to do it. There's no other... Oh, I could leave it, I suppose. Right, that's that. Ah, there we go. That gives us access. Right, what can we see? Unfortunately, I haven't got the access I want, because I'd need to be able to plug it in and have it all eject so I could look at the mechanism properly, but you can't have it all connected once you get the front off. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but I think I've got an idea what might be making the noise. I don't know if you can see this wheel here. It seems to catch ever so slightly on the top, and I wonder if it's something that's been affected by heat. It's kind of warped, but I've tried to straighten it out, but it is plastic, so if it was metal I might have more chance, but as it stands I've got it clearing the plastic a little bit more now. It was rubbing against it before. Whether or not that does anything, we'll find out, or perhaps I've just broken the whole thing. Who knows? But you know what, I'm going to give up now. I'm going to put the front back on this after I've blown it out with a bit of air, just to make sure there's no hair stuck in any of this. When I look around the inside of this, it makes me realise in a way how much has been lost over the last 20 years when it comes to affordable consumer electronics. It's built in China. It says on the back there, made in China, at least that part of it is. I'm sure quite a few parts. But nowadays it tends to be that because they want to sell things at a really low price, they're using low quality components, whereas in this, even though it was built to fit within a certain price range, you can see that they've used the best quality things that they could while still being able to make a profit on it. Right, final screw going in, and hopefully I won't have to take these out again in a moment. Let's find out. Let's plug the speakers back in and see if it does anything. Now, I do worry about those ribbon cables, whether or not I got them in properly. Haven't plugged it in yet. This is live. This is, well, it's not live, it's recorded, isn't it? Let me just get it plugged in and the power switched on. See if we get a puff of smoke. Oh, CD's still making a noise. Brilliant. Okay. Is it as bad as before? It's exactly the same. Yeah, so that's just an issue. It is that piece of plastic though. I know now that it isn't something that's breaking. It's not something that needs lubricating. It's just a piece of plastic that kind of spins around and gets stuck in the wrong part. And I think this has probably been placed on something maybe that was warm or been in a very warm room, and that piece of plastic has kind of bent up. It's like a flower, but the petals on it seem to have bent up just enough to catch the top. It has to be perfectly flat. But the thing I really want to try out is this tape deck, so let's put a cassette in here. Yeah, my tape sound just fine played on this, and it might be my age, but I just can't hear the hiss. Maybe it's got some kind of digital noise reduction technology or something, but sound fine to me for tapes with no Dolby on them, and no Dolby decoding on the device either. Oh, and the auto reverse is working fine as well. So if you wanted to play your old tapes back, well, you could do far worse than something like this. But talking of Dolby, I wonder what this is referring to on the back. It says US and foreign patents licensed from Dolby Laboratories. And so that nobody complains, US and foreign patents, licensed from Dolby Laboratories. But whichever way you say it, I wonder what those patents or patents are. No idea. It's nothing to do with Dolby noise reduction, I think. There's no mention of it anywhere, and you can't switch it on or off. So, something else. Now, looking in the manual at the wow and flutter specs at the bottom here, you can see 0.15% plus and minus, or 0.1% WRMS NAB, or plus and minus 0.2%. So yeah, there's different ways of measuring these things. I think this is the one I normally go off, plus and minus 0.15. So not the best in the world, but let's press play on the tape and see what it gets. So we'll start off by looking at the display on the right. That's the wow and flutter. It's showing quite low down there, so we'll bring the scale up. So I'm using 0.3%. So we're looking at the bottom row there, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. It's hanging around 0.15, just like it's supposed to do. So that's within the specs. On the left here, the speed, it's a little bit fast, but not much. It's running around about 0.35% fast. So you'd be perfectly happy listening to a cassette on this. And I should mention that I'm really happy with the frequency response of this cassette deck. In the manual it states it goes from 50 Hz up to 13,000 with a plus or minus 3 decibels. I wanted to check this out for myself, so I played a wave file of a sine wave sweep from my digital music player in through the optical input on the back of the HiFi, recorded it onto tape, played that back, and it managed to light up all the bars from one end to the other. Now you'll remember perhaps when I've demoed some other tape decks, they only light up the middle ones. This did the whole lot. It shows it's got a better frequency response even than what it mentions in the manual. Mini HiFi systems like this were very popular in the UK, or at least in my experience they were. I mean, there's two things that I'm using to point to that, and the first one is that there's always loads of them second-hand for sale on eBay. But the second thing is that there was a point when everyone's house that I visited, everyone that I knew, all the relatives, everyone else, they all had a Mini HiFi system in the corner of the room. And for most of those people, it was the last hi-fi they had. They might have had earlier things, music centres and stack systems and things, but they all worked their way down to something like this. And then eventually, in most people's houses, these disappeared as well, and they might just be left now with perhaps a Bluetooth speaker. I don't know if you've ever seen the 1960 film The Time Machine, but there's that scene when he's looking at the shop window and there's the mannequin and the clothes on it are changing as fashions progress over the decades. It all moves in fast forward. If you were to do a similar thing with a UK lounge, a living room, and show that moving through time, well, of course, we'd start off with like a radio, which would be the focal point of the room, and then the television comes in, so that gets shoved over. But then that becomes a radiogram, and then the radiogram becomes, well, a music centre, kind of big, long, flat thing. And then the music centre becomes like a stack system, and then the stack system then moves down to like a MIDI system, and then that becomes a mini system, and then finally, puff, it's all gone. There's nothing left. And that is pretty much what I've seen over the course of my life, not going all the way back to the radio stuff, but I remember when the music system was like the big thing, just after the gramophone. And I've seen all these things kind of grow and then get smaller and then disappear in most people's houses. But yeah, based upon my experience, the mini system was very popular in the UK. Oh, and I better add in quickly here that I'm talking about your average person there. Not hi-fi enthusiasts, not the kind of person with bi-wired speakers and £2,000 amplifier, whether that's weight or value, and the record cleaners, all that kind of stuff. No, there's always these enthusiasts, they're kind of outliers as far as these things go. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just your average member of the public. My mother-in-law, for example, or my brother, they would fall into this category of someone that would have one of these in the corner of the room back in the early 2000s, but if you went to their house nowadays, there's nothing there like this. Probably over a year ago now, somebody sent me this Minidisc. It's Reflectivity, and the album, or EP, is called You Can't Even Get Lost in This Town Anymore. Now, the reason I'm using this is because it's got some nice acoustic guitar stuff on it, so you'll be able to hear whether or not there's any tape hiss when I record it across to the tape. So first off, just have a listen to the Minidisc, and then we'll have a listen to the tapes version of the same track. Now I'd just like to copy this compact disc across to a mini disc, and the reason for that is because I want to see whether or not it copies at 4 times speed, because the instructions were a little bit vague with regard to that, and whether or not it brings with it the CD text information, because again it didn't quite specify that. But the CD is 68 minutes in length, so if it records at 4 times speed, which it should do, that will only take 17 minutes to copy. Let's find out. Now while I unwrap this mini disc, I'll just mention on the screen here you might see there's a picture of a CD and a cassette, and that means that there's one of each of those present in the machine at the moment. So once I put this mini disc in as well, you'll see a mini disc symbol appear there. I think that's a nice little touch. At least you know what's inside the machine without pressing eject, because you can't see otherwise. You can just about make out the cassette in the top, but it's not very clear. Now there's a couple of options to pick for the mini disc recording. We could choose either LP2 or LP4 long play modes, mono for even longer recording time, or stereo, which is what I'm going to pick. And then the synchro options, we can do, well, CD to mini disc, CD to tape, tape to mini disc to tape, both of those recording at the same time, or high speed. That's what I'm selecting, and then it gets itself ready. That's the CD player spinning up, just checking that I can do a high speed recording of this one. Sometimes CDs don't let you do that because there's too many errors on them. It's got to be a good quality CD, but this one's showing fine. So press start. So the start is enter/start. So just press this now, and there we go. We're recording across, and look at the speed of it going there. You can see that this is doing high speed recording, 4 times speed. Get a nice little symbol there, CD to MD. The little arrow on there points to the left. So it'll only be perhaps, I don't know, 15 minutes or so now. So I might as well just go and have a coffee, and then when I come back, we'll see if this mini disc has brought the text information along with it. It should do, but we'll find out. Now it's nearly finished copying across, but I just wanted to mention something about this remote control just before it finishes. You'll need the remote if you plan on getting some kind of device like this. More likely than not all the features on the remote will be included on the device. There's a menu button on here I used earlier on when I wanted to erase a mini disc. You had to get into a menu and choose an option. There's no menu button on this thing, so unless you've got the remote you wouldn't be able to do that. And there's other things like a direct track access by pressing a button, naming things. You've got shortcut buttons on here, and there's a few other things you will need the remote for. So yeah, if you get hold of one of these, try and get the remote for it. This remote I had to buy separately. It's quite yellowed, but it doesn't really matter. It's more about what it does than what it looks like. It did cost me about £20 though, so it was a considerable percentage of the overall value of one of these things. So it's better off if someone's bundling the remote with it. But overall, still, this whole thing cost me less than £100, including the remote control. But yeah, there's our CD copied across to a mini disc. So let's just move this out of the way. And let's press play on the mini disc and see if the track names come up. There we go, we've got the text coming across, that's the track name. Now one thing I want to mention is if you wanted to show that text later on once it goes back to the time, you'll need to press the display button. There's no display button on here, there's only one, again, on the remote control. Let's just try another couple of tracks, we'll move on. Yep, all the track names are copied across. So that worked perfectly. But if we're talking about track titles, let me just take this disc out of here and put in a little CD single, because you're supposed to be able to name your CDs. Even if they don't have text on them, you can apply a name to them, and I think you can label up to 50. Let me just have a look in the instructions here. Yeah, it says you can label 50 CDs with titles of up to 20 symbols and characters. So there's 3 tracks on this CD, and again I'm going to have to use a button that's only on the remote control, name, edit, select there in the middle. So if I press that, I can now name this one. I haven't figured out how to make it lowercase. I'm sure there's a button on the remote somewhere, but we'll just stick with the capitals for the moment, and then I presume I just press enter. There we go. Right, so that CD is now called Phil Collins. So what I'm going to do now is eject that CD and then put it straight back in again, and the device should be able to recognise the CD and display the name at the top of the screen that we've allocated to it. And there we go, Phil Collins. Now again, it can only recognise 50 CDs this way, but I suppose some people could find that useful. Now, I suppose it should go without saying, but I'd best say it anyway. You can erase those names from the device's memory. If I press the menu button on the remote control here, I can read the name, add a name, erase the name, or erase all the names in the memory, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'll press yes on that, and then I've got to press yes again, and there we go. All the names stored in the memory are now erased. I've put a better aerial on the back of this now, so it's getting a better reception than it was before. In fact, it's pretty good now. And you'll notice the radio, you can have it scan through the frequencies if you want, or you can manually do it yourself, and it will find the radio station here, display the RDS information at the top. But if I want to store that, I've got to use the remote control again. So I'm going to store that at position number 4. So that means I've got some presets on here now. Now, of course, those are directly accessible by the remote control. You can go to the presets I've stored earlier just by pressing a number on there. But from the device itself, I can change the tuning mode between a manual tune, that scan, or presets. I've got it set to presets now, so when I turn this button here, it will move between the radio stations that I've stored in memory. And I've got to say, I'm really happy with the quality of the radio. Of course, where I am, you can only really pick up FM. There's no point me trying the AM, although I did test it out off camera earlier on. I can just about get sport talk radio, but it's really crackly. AM radio in the UK has largely been abandoned. That's why I never really go into it in any great detail. But as far as FM goes, it's working really well. And of course, we're getting the RDS information across the top. So yeah, no problem with the radio. You can see why this would have appealed back in the day. I mean, if someone had a large hi-fi and then it was either taking up too much room or they found they weren't using it so much anymore, but they still had all their old cassettes and CDs and things and they wanted to be able to listen to the radio as well, well, why not downsize to something like this? In most cases, a lot of those larger hi-fis that people would have had that they had before these wouldn't have sounded as good as this. They would have had some kind of cheapy stack system or MIDI system, some Amstrad thing. I mean, this would actually be a big step up from that. I think this was a bit of a golden era for affordable but decent quality hi-fi. I mean, just think of all the components we've got in here. If you were to separate them out, you've got an amplifier, you've got speakers, cassette deck, mini disc, CD player, and then it's not just like the basic versions of those. I mean, the CD player's got CD text, the radio's got RDS on there, the cassette deck, whilst it's not the best in the world, it's got auto reverse and soft touch controls. So yeah, this was a period when Sony really knew how to make an affordable but decent quality device that would suit most people's needs. One thing I didn't think about earlier on though, when I was mentioning what you could plug in the back, was Bluetooth. You can, of course, plug your Bluetooth receiver into this. So let me get hold of one of those. So, of course, there's loads of different Bluetooth receivers you could use. This one's just a Logitech device. We've got RCA line level outputs on the back, as well as a 3.5mm mini jack that I'm not using at the moment. And then the power inputs coming in here. It accepts 5 volts, so I've got it plugged into a USB power brick at the other end, but at this end it's a barrel plug. Now that's one thing with this particular device, of course it doesn't have any kind of USB port on it, otherwise I'd be powering this from the hi-fi itself. But you can just pop that down the back there and then I can send my audio through to it. Now I want to select the RCA inputs. Fortunately on the front here we've got this function button which cycles through all the different inputs. So there it was, I've skipped past it. So go back round to analog input and that should be my Bluetooth. Now it's got a built-in clock which displays all the time the device is in standby. Again, this is something you can only set with the remote control. Other things you can do with the clock is to set a sleep timer, so it will switch off after whatever amount of time you set on there. But also you can get it to wake you up, so it can work as an alarm clock and it can play either the CD, the mini disc, the radio or the cassette at whatever time you set. And the last handy feature I wanted to mention is that this can do timed recordings. So you set it to a radio preset, you choose the start time, the stop time, whether you want to record onto cassette or mini disc, and then it will wake itself up from standby at that time and do that recording. Of course, when it's doing it, it doesn't play the radio out loud, it's just recording it onto the media that you've chosen. Now, I'm sure you've spotted throughout the video that this thing still needs a good clean. It's probably been sending some people mad. We've got these speckledy dots on here, which hopefully I can get off, but also this stuff inside the speaker. Yeah, it comes up all right. It's just dust. I'll give it a bit of a polish and then we'll do a summary. Now, I've got to mention something about the price I paid. So it's £76, but then again, I paid for a remote control on top of that. So we're just under £100. Now, if you go looking on eBay today, which is what I did, the cheapest price I found one of these advertised for is £135. The most expensive was, I think, £176. Now, I know that if I don't mention this, there'd be people that would go looking on there and say, oh, everyone's put the prices up, it's the Techmoan effect. Now, first off, people on eBay don't put prices up for their personal adverts based upon what one guy puts out in a YouTube video. They're not able to kind of link all those things together that quickly. What tends to happen is that somebody might watch a video that I put out and go, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind one of those. They'll go on eBay, they'll have a look what's listed, and they'll buy the cheapest one. And it'd only take 3 or 4 people to do that, and all the cheap ones are then gone. So all you're left with are the expensive ones. So yeah, they'd be more expensive than this if you went looking today. I don't know what it's going to be like when this video comes out, but I got this at a low price by just being patient, waiting for the prices to come down, waiting for one that was local, one that I could pick up, one that I didn't have to pay postage on, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you go on there and you fancy one of these, I wouldn't just go and buy the first one you see at the highest price and then blame me. No, put in a safe search. Get it to notify you when one appears at a certain price range that you're willing to pay for, or one that's in your area, that kind of thing. I've got to say though, it's not all guaranteed sunshine and roses with old mini systems though. You've got to bear in mind that these things are getting on in years. There'll be plenty of people who are watching this video right now who weren't even born when this thing came out, and plenty of those people will have children of their own. I've got to say, over in the US, you won't see this model, I don't think. I don't think it came out over there. One of the reasons will be because of the Minidisc recorder on here. And you can blame that on the RIAA intimidating and putting off retailers and record labels from going anywhere near any recording format after the compact cassette. They felt like they were caught sleeping letting the compact cassette came out, and then after that, any new home hi-fi recording equipment that came out, they did their very best to kill it off. Fortunately, RIAA, that's over in the US. In the UK, they didn't really bother too much. Over in Japan, especially not the other way, they were all for recording everything, and you'll find loads of things like this with Minidisc recorders on over there. But there's a few words awarded on importing from Japan. I'll do a separate video about importing Mini HiFis from Japan, because there are pros and cons, and it's mostly cons, unfortunately. But yeah, if you're interested in anything like this, I'll have some links in the video description. It'll point you kind of in the right direction on eBay. I can try and get some affiliate revenue if you do decide to buy anything. But yeah, don't just look at this particular model. This is the one that I like the look of, but there's a lot of alternatives. But there's also a lot of rubbish out there. Just because it's a small hi-fi doesn't mean it's good. You know, it's really luck of the draw with these things. They're not really built to last, is what I mean to say. But you know, in my opinion, still, despite saying all those things, the best value today in used hi-fi can often be found in mini systems. But you've just got to get a little bit lucky not to get a lemon. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.